I think that everyone recognizes that Toronto is Canada's most multicultural and multiracial city, and in fact one of the most diverse cities in Toronto, in Canada, and perhaps in North America. The residents of Toronto and the regions around it, which is known as the Greater Toronto region, the Greater Toronto area, is home to people from over 200 countries of the world and speaking more than 150 languages, practicing many religious traditions. What this chart in front of you shows is a very small example of that diversity. It also shows some statistics related to the Toronto District School Board. The first statistic on the page tells you that about half of the people who live in the city of Toronto were actually born outside of Canada. And of the students within the Toronto schools, the Toronto public schools, 28%, more than one quarter, are born outside of Canada. And so this chart does give you a picture of the diversity. The last nugget gives you an idea of the many languages. These are, I mentioned that there are over 150 languages spoken in Toronto. Well, here are some of the major groups that make up part of our Toronto community. Toronto is known as a city that has developed a successful model of integration of immigrant communities in our schools and our cities, and for that we can take some pride. Within that diversity, the city has achieved a fair degree of social cohesion, and also identifies itself quite proudly as a city for whom diversity is our strength. But having said that, I want our audience to know that this journey towards this successful model of integration is not an easy one. There are many challenges along the way for both minority communities. I think we should also begin to refer to them as global majorities. There are challenges for minority communities who are introduced to our mainstream cultures and institutions, but there are also challenges for the dominant mainstream cultures and institutions in making the accommodations necessary for successful integration. And I will address some of those challenges in my remarks. It is fair to say that if we are going to commit ourselves to creating a level playing field for all communities, we have to start with acknowledging the barriers that exist. For example, what's on your screen now is an excerpt from the Equity Foundation statement, or the equity policy, if you wish, of the Toronto District School Board. What this excerpt, or this paragraph, states is that we acknowledge that certain groups in our society are treated unfairly, inequitably, because of individual and systemic biases and prejudices related to a number of factors, such as race, culture, ethnicity, linguistic origin, and so on. It is important for us to acknowledge that people do face barriers, and those barriers come from issues of bias and prejudice that they face, and that in fact erect barriers for integration. We acknowledge that those biases exist in the society, and we acknowledge that those biases also exist in our school system. Now, our Equity Foundation statement goes on to state a number of commitments that we make to addressing that inequity, and on the Toronto District School Board's website, www.TDSB, that's the acronym for Toronto District School Board, .on.ca, you can access, by doing a search for Equity Foundation Statement, you can find the full statement, which expresses the various ways in which the board expresses its commitment. So it's very important for institutions to express its values about integration, about social cohesion, about addressing inequity, because that belief statement, that value statement, that mission statement provides the foundation for the actions that we all take. Now, our mission, stated mission of the Toronto District School Board is to enable all students to reach high levels of achievement. And the operating word there is all, not most students, but all students, and all students of all backgrounds, identities, and heritages. The reality is that in our experience, despite our best efforts, that 75% of our students successfully graduate from our secondary schools. Now, some students do leave our schools prematurely and come back after working for a year or two and successfully graduate. But the percentage is around 75%. So therefore, the challenge is to close that achievement gap. And when we look at the statistics, when we look behind the numbers, we see that certain groups are the groups who are most predominantly at the lower end of our achievement ladder, and that includes black students, Aboriginal students, Latinos, Portuguese, students from the Middle East, and so on. So that's our challenge. The challenge is to close the achievement gap to the point where we have the same relative levels of success for all students in our system. I want to put up on your screen now just an example of the data that we have collected through a student survey that we call the student census, which we are committed to do every 5 years. We started this census in 2006, where we we surveyed, I should say, all students from grade 7 to grade 12. Grade 12 is the grade at which students leave our secondary schools. And we also surveyed parents of children from kindergarten, where they enter school, to grade 6. This excerpt on your screen gives you a small example of the perceptions of students of their environment. We asked students about 50 questions. 15 of those questions were questions about their background, their country of origin, their racial background, the countries of origin of their parents' first language, their home circumstances, parents' occupation, etc. But 35 of those questions were questions related to asking students from grade 7 to grade 12, what do they think about their schools and their lives outside of schools. And this chart gives you a very small example of the comparative data for 5 of those students. And let's just take one of them just for purposes of illustration. Take the second one. I feel comfortable answering questions in class all of the time. Well, across the system, we found that of our Aboriginal students, or Native First Nation students, 39% answered that question in the affirmative, yes. Of black students, 60% said, yes, I feel comfortable answering questions in class all of the time. East Asians or Chinese students from Hong Kong, from China, 52%. Latino or Hispanic students from Latin America, 55%. And white students or students of European English-speaking background, 70%. You can see a sort of relative difference among different groups. It is extremely important for us to identify how students feel about their environment so that we can change it. What's important about these kinds of statistics is that we have to look at both parts of the equation that add up to 100%. So that, for example, if we did say that if we found out that 60% of black students or students of African descent in Toronto schools say that they feel comfortable answering questions in class, it is important for us to ask those students what it is, what are the factors that allow them to feel comfortable. And for that 40%, we have to ask the same question. What are the circumstances that make you not feel comfortable in participating or answering questions in class? So this information is extremely important in helping us to have the kinds of conversations with students that we need to have in order to address their environment, in order to make changes in their environment. So I put that up just to demonstrate that we need to get behind the information and find out from our primary stakeholders how they feel about what we do.